Alexandra Eala from the Philippines.
For someone who grew up in the Philippines and
4 wins, 3 losses, 7 matches, 3 weeks, 1 player. That was Alexandra Eala's entire record heading into Wimbledon. One of those 4 wins was over a 2-time Grand Slam champion. One of those 3 losses came 8 days before her opening match at the biggest tournament on the calendar. Both facts are true. Only one of them got a headline. By the time this video ends, you'll understand why the one nobody talked about was the one that actually mattered, and why almost nobody watching in real time knew what they were looking at. Start with the loss, because that's the one everyone remembers wrong. June 22nd, Bad Homburg. Elise Mertens, straight sets, 6-3, 6-3, clean. No third set fight, no signature comeback. The kind of scoreline that gets a player written off in a single sentence. Tired, faded, overextended before the tournament that actually matters. Tennis media ran with exactly that read. A few analysts quietly wondered aloud whether 4 grass court events back-to-back had been one tournament too many for a 21-year-old body that had already logged more matches this season than most of the top 20. That read was clean, confident, and wrong. Because 5 days earlier, in Berlin, something had already happened that the sport hadn't fully processed yet. June 17th, first round. Donna Vekic, a proven grass court competitor with a Wimbledon semi-final on her resume. Eala wins. 2 days later, Elena Svitolina, a former top 5 player, a multiple Grand Slam semi-finalist, someone who has beaten more major champions in her career than most players ever face. Eala wins that one too. Then, June 18th, the result that should have rewritten every prediction written about her for the rest of the season. Elena Rybakina, 2-time major champion, the 2022 Wimbledon winner, world number 2 at the time, on the exact surface she has spent her entire career using to end other players' tournaments early. Eala beats her, 7-5, 6-4. Sit with that scoreline for a second, because the surface makes it matter more than the ranking does. Grass rewards big serving and short points. It is supposed to be the terrain where a player like Rybakina is closest to unbeatable. Eala didn't outserve her. She outlasted her, extending rallies, forcing errors, doing exactly the kind of patient, counter-punching tennis that grass is supposed to punish. Analysts who watched it live started using a word they hadn't used about her before: dangerous. 3 wins in 5 days. 2 of them over players who have lifted Grand Slam trophies. On the surface, she was least expected to dominate. 5 weeks before Wimbledon even started. Then it stopped. Linda Noskova in the semi-final, 6-2, 6-4. A clean, one-sided loss with no signature fight in it either. A week later, Mertens closed out the tune-up season the same way. Here's the sentence that actually explains everything, and it's the part almost every recap skipped. A player who is fading doesn't beat a 2-time major champion in the middle of her slump. A player who is running on empty doesn't have 3/4 of a week like that. What Berlin and Bad Homburg actually showed, side by side, wasn't fatigue. It was a player who had already answered the only question that mattered to her that month, and simply had nothing left to spend on 2 events that weren't the one she actually cared about. You don't play your best tennis in a warm-up tournament you're using as a tune-up. You play your best tennis when there's a reason to. That's the real question this story had been sitting on for 2 years. And it was never really about talent. Everyone in tennis had already conceded the talent. It was about which version of her shows up when it counts. The one who beats Rybakina on grass, or the one who loses to Mertens 8 days before the biggest stage of her career. Wimbledon was where the sport finally got its answer, whether it wanted one or not. Before we get to center court, it's worth remembering where this entire run started from, because the distance traveled is part of what makes it land so hard. 12 months ago, Alexandra Eala's ranking sat around 140 in the world. She had never been seeded at a major in her life. This June, for the first time, she walked into a Grand Slam draw as the 29th seed, the first Filipino player, male or female, in the 147-year history of Grand Slam tennis, to be seeded at all. Go back further than that, and the number gets uncomfortable. 74 years. That's how long it had been since a Filipino player, Felicissimo Ampon, in the amateur era at Roland Garros, had gone even remotely deep at a major. 74 years of silence, broken not once but twice this year, first by the seeding itself, then by everything that came after it. And this wasn't a quiet climb nobody noticed. At the Australian Open back in January, before she'd won a single match in the main draw, her press conference pulled more YouTube views than the world number ones. 71,000 to 9,000. An unseeded 20-year-old outdrawing the best player alive, months before any of this happened. The sport had been trying to tell itself this was still a modest, feel-good story with a ceiling. The numbers had already disagreed. Saturday, July 4th. Center court. Iga Swiatek, 6 Grand Slam titles, defending champion. The woman who beat Amanda Anisimova 6-0, 6-0 in this exact final 12 months earlier, walks in a heavy favorite. She walks out, having lost her title in straight sets. The first set alone should tell you this was never a formality. 84 minutes. Swiatek held 2 set points at 6-5 in the tiebreak. 1 point differently played, anywhere in that sequence, and this video doesn't exist. This becomes a respectable third-round loss nobody remembers by August. It didn't happen that way. Eala closed the tiebreak 11-9. By the time the second set started, BBC commentators Anne Keothavong and Joe Dury weren't describing shots anymore. They were describing a racket thrown into a bag, and 27 unforced errors from a 6-time major champion who was supposed to be untouchable on this surface. When the commentary stops being about tennis and starts being about body language, the match already tipped 10 minutes earlier. Now put the two numbers next to each other, because this is the detail that turns a great win into a complete story. Eala converted 5 of 7 breakpoints against Swiatek. Swiatek converted 3 of 11. That is not a lucky afternoon. That is the exact same player who broke down Rybakina's serve in Berlin, not the player who lost to Mertens with nothing on the line 8 days earlier. Both of those players are real. Only one of them shows up when a Grand Slam title is actually on the table. Final score, 7-6-9, 6-2. 2 hours, 14 minutes. First Filipino player, male or female, in the Open era, to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam. And worth remembering here, this wasn't even the first time Eala had beaten Swiatek. She'd done it once already, in Miami in 2025, on a hard court, in a result that made her name outside the Philippines for the first time. Swiatek got her revenge on clay in Madrid a few months later. 2 players, 2 surfaces, 1 win apiece, walking into a decider on the one surface where a Wimbledon title was actually the prize. Eala now leads that head-to-head, 2-1, and the one that counted the most is the one she just won. And here's where it stopped being a tennis story. Walking off center court, Eala couldn't finish her own sentence. "I'm really emotional," she said, before the tears took over completely. Then, through them, that for someone like Swiatek or Serena or Venus, a win like this might look small next to a wall of trophies. But for a girl who trained after school with her brother and grandfather in ruffled socks and light-up shoes, this is everything. It's worth noting who exactly she mentioned in that sentence, because it isn't random. Earlier this season, Venus Williams, 5-time Wimbledon singles champion, chose Eala as her doubles partner, at Bad Homburg and again here at Wimbledon. Venus doesn't pick partners out of sentiment. She picks players whose games she respects on grass specifically. So when Eala name-checked her through tears on center court, that wasn't a random legend's name dropped for effect. That was a genuine peer relationship, and Venus responded publicly within hours, calling the win exactly what it was, making history. Manny Pacquiao, the single biggest name Philippine sports has ever produced, in a country where boxing and basketball have always outranked every other sport combined, said publicly he was proud of her. A boxing legend and a 5-time Wimbledon champion, reacting to the same result within hours of each other. That's not 2 athletes being polite. That's a country's entire sporting identity, moving in real time, live, on a Saturday afternoon in London. Zoom out, because the structural fact underneath all of this matters as much as the emotional one. This is a player who trains at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, a place that has quietly framed her rise as one of its signature stories since she was 13 years old. Before this tournament even began, the Academy posted publicly, calling her journey from the Philippines to Mallorca truly inspiring. The people who have watched her most closely for 8 years were the least surprised in the building when Swiatek's serve started cracking under pressure. That's usually what real mentorship looks like when it works. Not shock, recognition. So here's what actually matters walking into her next match against Jasmine Paolini, a Wimbledon and Roland Garros finalist, not a shaky champion having an off day. Berlin already told you what Eala is capable of against elite players on a surface she wasn't supposed to dominate. Bad Homburg already told you she's human enough to lose when nothing's on the line. The only question left is which version of her Paulini gets, because both of those players are real, and only one of them has ever mattered on the days that count. Drop your prediction below, and be specific, because after this week, nobody gets to say both versions weren't real. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel is tracking every set of this run, from the Berlin scalp that predicted it to whatever center court has left to give.